Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Bshra. I will give a lecture in literary criticism for fourth-year students. This lecture is about modern critical approaches to literature. I will start with Russian formalism. Russian formalism is a literary scholarship which originated in the second decade of the 20th century and was forcibly suppressed in 1930. The movement was championed by philologists and literary historians such as Roman Jakobson and others. Formalism is concerned with the form of the text, the narrative structures, the syntax, the dictionary definitions of words, the poetic forms, meter, styles, poetic devices like metonymy and metaphor and simile, the parts that make up a literary work. Its main strongholds were the Moscow Linguistic Circle, founded in 1915, and the Petrograd Society for the Study of Poetic Language, formed in 1916. The initial statement of the formalist position is found in the symposium Poetics, Studies in the Theory of Poetic Language, 1919, and in Modern Russian Poetry, 1921, by Roman Jakobson. Russian formalists rejected many 19th century assumptions of textual analysis, especially the belief that a work of literature was the expression of the author's worldview, and their dismissal of the psychological and biographical criticism as being irrelevant to interpretation. These scholars declared the autonomy of literature and poetic language, advocating a scientific approach to literary interpretation. To study literature is to study poetics, which is an analysis of works' constituent parts, its linguistic and structural features, or its form. Form, they asserted, included the internal mechanics of the work itself, especially its poetic language. These internal mechanics, or what the formalists called devices, comprise the artfulness and literariness of any given text, not the work's content. As a group, the Russian formalists were suppressed and disbanded in 1930 by the Soviet government because they were unwilling to view literature through the Stalinist regime's political and ideological perspectives. Their influence, however, continued to flourish in Czechoslovakia through the work of Prague Linguistic Circle, founded in 1926, its leading figure being Roman Jakobson, and through the Russian folktale scholar Vladimir Prop. Now we move to a new school of criticism, new criticism. New criticism provides readers with a formula for arriving at the correct interpretation of a text, using only the text itself. According to new criticism, the poem's overall meaning or form depends solely on the text. No library research, no studying of the author's life and times, and no other extra textual information is needed. The poem itself contains all the necessary information to discover its meaning. A new criticism emerged in American universities as the leading form of textual analysis throughout the late 1930s until the early 1960s. However, its roots stem from two British critics and authors, T.S. Eliot and I.A. Richards. From Eliot, new criticism borrows its insistence that criticism be directed toward the poem, not the poet. The poet, declares Eliot, does not infuse the poem with his or her personality and emotions, but uses language in such a way as to incorporate within the poem the impersonal feelings and emotions common to all humankind. Thus, poetry is not freeing of the poet's emotions, but an escape from them. The new critics also borrowed Eliot's belief that the reader of poetry must be instructed in literary technique. Eliot maintains that a good reader perceives the poem structurally, resulting in good criticism. Such a reader must necessarily be trained in reading good poetry and be well acquainted with established poetic traditions. A poor reader, on the other hand, simply expresses his or her personal emotions and reactions to a text. Key terms in new criticism, such as objective, correlative. According to Eliot, the only way of expressing emotion through art is by finding an objective correlative, or a set of objects, a situation, a chain of events, or reactions that can effectively awaken in the reader the emotional response that the author desires without being a direct statement of that emotion. Another term, close reading. From I.A. Richards, a psychologist and literary critic, a new criticism borrows a term that has become synonymous with its methods of analysis, practical criticism. In an experiment at Cambridge University, Richards distributed to his students copies of poems minus such information as the authors, dates, spelling, and punctuation, and asked them to record their responses. From these data, he identified the difficulties that poetry presents to the readers, including matters of interpretation, poetic techniques, and specific meanings. From this analysis, Richards then devised a system of arriving at a poem's meaning. This close scrutiny or close reading of a text has become synonymous with new criticism. New critics assert that a poem has ontological status, that is, it possesses its own being and exists like any other object. For them to believe that a poem's meaning is nothing more than an expression of the private experiences or intentions of its author is to commit a fundamental error or of interpretation, which they call the intentional fallacy. Any literary work is a public text that can only be understood by applying these standards of public discourse, not simply the private experience, concerns, and vocabulary of its author. Affective fallacy. Placing little emphasis on the author, the social context, or a text's historical situation as sources for discovering a poem's meaning. The new critics assert that a reader's emotional response to the text is neither important nor equivalent to its interpretation. Such an error in judgment is called the affective fallacy. Where can we find the poem's meaning? As the poem itself is an artifact or an objective entity, its meaning must reside within its own structure. The new critics assert that a careful scrutiny reveals that a poem's structure operates according to a complex series of laws. By closely analyzing this structure, they believe they have devised a methodology and a standard of excellence that we can apply to all poems to discover their correct meaning. Now we move to another school of criticism, the psychoanalytic criticism, or psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis is a literary theory which is influenced by the tradition of psychoanalysis begun by the Vienna neurologist and psychologist Sigmund Freud. In addition to Freud, major figures include Jacques Lacan and Shoshana Fellman. Key terms in psychoanalysis: unconscious. It is the irrational part of the psyche unavailable to a person's consciousness except through dissociated acts or dreams. Defense mechanisms. The defense mechanisms are used by the ego as a way to deal with conflict or problems in life, operating at an unconscious level. Defense mechanisms help to reduce negative feelings, such as anxiety and guilt. Common defense mechanisms include dreams, literature, repression, denial, and projection. Freud's model of the psyche. Freud divided the psyche into three parts: id, ego, superego. Id is completely unconscious part of the psyche that serves as a storehouse of our secret desires, darkest wishes, and most intense fears. The id wishes only to fulfill the urges of the pleasure principle. The id houses the libido, the source of psychosexual energy. Ego. It is mostly to partially conscious part of the psyche that possesses, experiences, and operates as a referee or mediator between the id and superego. Superego. It is often thought of as one's conscience. The superego operates like an internal censor, encouraging major moral judgments in light of social pressures. It serves primarily to protect society and us from the id. Phases of a human development. Freud proposed several phases or stages of a human development that he believed are important to the healthy growth of one's psyche. According to Freud, the child passes through these phases: the pre-Oedipal development phase and the Oedipal, castration, and Electra phases. The name of the Oedipus complex derives from the Greek myth where Oedipus, a young man, kills his father and marries his mother. Upon discovering this, he pokes his eyes out and becomes blind. This Oedipal is the general term for both Oedipus and Electra complexes. An example can be found in Hamlet of Shakespeare's play, tragedy Hamlet. The example is a prime of someone. It is a prime example of someone who suffered from the Oedipus complex. The son Hamlet continually postpones the act of revenge against his uncle Claudius because of the impossibly complicated psychodynamic situation in which he finds himself. Though he hates his uncle, he nevertheless unconsciously identifies with him. For having killed Hamlet's father and married his mother, Claudius has carried out what are Hamlet's own unconscious wishes. In addition, marriage to Hamlet's mother gives the uncle the unconscious status of the father. Destructive impulses towards whom provoke great anxiety and meet with oppression. The significance of dreams. In his book, The Interpretations of Dreams, Freud asserts that the unconscious expresses its suppressed wishes and desires. The unconscious redirects and reshapes the concealed wishes into acceptable social activities, presenting them in the form of images or symbols in our dreams or our writings. In the process, the psyche creates a window to the id by allowing these softened and socially acceptable desires to seep into the conscious state. Literature and psychoanalysis. For Freud, the unresolved conflicts that give rise to any neurosis constitute the stuff of literature. A work of literature, he believes, is the external expression of the author's unconscious mind. Accordingly, the literary work must then be treated like a dream, applying psychoanalytic techniques to the text to uncover the author's hidden motivations, repressed desires, and wishes. Psychoanalytical criticism. Psychoanalytic criticism focused mainly on the author. Known as psychobiography, this method of analysis begins by amassing biographical information about an author through biographies, personal letters, lectures, and any other document related in some way to the author. One of the most controversial psychoanalytic techniques used today involves applying Freud's key assumptions that all human behavior is sexually driven directly to a text. In the hands of novice critics who are often ill or misinformed about Freud's psychoanalytic techniques, everything in a text more frequently than not becomes a sexual image. For these critics, every concave image, such as a flower, cup, cave, or vase, is a ionic symbol, female, and any image whose length exceeds its diameter, such as a tower, sword, knife, or pen, becomes a phallic symbol for male. Consequently, a text containing a dance, a boat floating into a cave, or a pen being placed within a cup is interpreted as a symbol of sexual intimacy. From this perspective, all images and actions within a text must be traced to the author's id, because everything in a text is ultimately the hidden wishes of the author's libido. Archetypal criticism or myth criticism, which is another school of criticism. It is a form of criticism based largely on the works of C.J. Jung. Archetypes, according to Jung, are primordial images or psychic residue of repeated types of experience in the lives of every ancient ancestors, which are inherited in the collective unconscious of the human race and are expressed in myths, religion, dreams, and private fantasies, as well as in the works of literature. Some common examples of archetypes include water for life, sun for light, moon for tide, colors, for example, red for danger, circles for unity, the great mother for earth, wise old man for ideas, etc. In terms of archetypal criticism, the color white might be associated with innocence or could signify death or the supernatural. Key terms in archetypal criticism: anima, feminine aspect, the inner feminine part of the male personality or a man's image of a woman. Animus, male aspect, an inner masculine part of the female personality or a woman's image of a man. Archetype. A typical or recurring image, character, narrative design, theme, or other literary phenomenon that has been in literature from the beginning and regularly reappears. Collective unconscious. A set of primal memories common to the human race, existing below each person's conscious mind. These structures of the unconscious mind shared among beings of the same species. Thank you very much. I hope this lecture will be of benefit to you. Thank you very much.